Have you ever wondered how animals, including humans, are able to breathe air and exhaust waste gases? Breathing is one of the most intricate tasks we must perform every day in order to keep our bodies alive. But how are we going to accomplish it? What is the body system that aids in the act of breathing? The answer lies with our body's respiratory system.
Good day to BSNS 1D and good day to you, sir. For today's discussion will be all about the respiratory system. We are going to discuss about the overview, the functions of respiratory system, as well as the parts which are categorized into upper and lower respiratory tract. And also, we are going to give you a brief introduction about the process of breathing. But for now, let us learn what respiratory system is. So, respiratory system basically is a collection of organs and tissues that assist in breathing or the inhale and exhale process. The airways, the lungs, the blood arteries, as well as the muscles that powers the lungs are all part of the system. So, these components work together in order for us to inhale oxygen or transport oxygen throughout our body and also to remove waste gases such as carbon dioxide away from our body. The respiratory system performs the following functions. First, in respiration. Like what I've said earlier, the respiratory system is the reason why we have the ability to breathe in and breathe out air and gases. Second, regulation of blood pH. The respiratory system can change the blood pH by adjusting the carbon dioxide levels in the blood. Third, voice production. Sound and speech are made possible by air passage past the vocal cords. Then, fourth is the olfaction. When airborne molecules are pulled into the nasal canal, the experience of smell arises. Then lastly, innate immunity. The respiratory system can protect us against some microorganisms as well as pathogens such as viruses by preventing them from entering our body and by removing them from the respiratory surfaces. So the next discussion will be about the upper respiratory tract.
Now we move on to the upper respiratory tract. Upper respiratory tract consists of upper airway organs, which are the nose, pharynx, and larynx. Upper respiratory tract organs provide passage for air to be breathed in and out of the lungs. They are also responsible for cleaning, humidifying, and warming the air that will go through the lungs. Remember, gas exchange do not occur in upper respiratory tract. Upper respiratory tract has three major organs. First is the nose. Nose is the primary organ responsible for the sense of smell. It consists of external nose and the nasal cavity. External nose, it is the most visible structure of the nose that forms the prominent feature of the face. Its major function is to protect the inner nose and allows the entry of air. Nasal cavity, it is the internal part of the nose. It is located above and behind the nose in the middle of the face. The main function of nasal cavity is it humidifies, warms, and filters air entering the body. It also protects the respiratory tract through the use of mucociliary system. Nasal cavity also contains the receptors which are responsible for olfaction. The hard palate forms the floor of the nasal cavity in which it separates the nasal cavity from the oral cavity. Conchi are the three prominent bony ridges in the lateral walls of the nasal cavity which is responsible for churning the air that causes the nasal cavity to humidify, filter, and warm the air. The next major organ in the upper respiratory tract is the pharynx. Pharynx is also called as the throat, which is known to be the common passageway for both the respiratory and the digestive systems that extends from the base of the skull to the level of the sixth cervical vertebra. This is where the air and food passes through. It is divided into three regions. First is the nasopharynx. Nasopharynx is the superior part of the pharynx. It is located posterior to the choanae and superior to the soft palate. Soft palate forms the floor of the pharynx, which separates the nasopharynx from the oropharynx. Nasopharynx helps in the transferring of air from the nose to the larynx. Oropharynx, it extends from the uvula to the epiglottis. It is lined with stratified squamous epithelium that is responsible for the protection against abrasion. This is where the foods, drinks, and air passes through. It is the most critical region for swallowing. The third division is the laryngopharynx. Laryngopharynx is posterior to the larynx and extends from the tip of the epiglottis to the esophagus. It is lined with stratified squamous epithelium and ciliated columnar epithelium. It can be found between the hyoid bone and the larynx and the esophagus. The laryngopharynx is responsible for guiding the food and air on where to go.
The third and last major organ on the upper respiratory tract is the larynx. Larynx is commonly called as the voice box. It is located in the anterior throat and extends from the base of the tongue to the trachea. It has three main functions. The first one is that it maintains an open airway. Second, it protects the airway during swallowing. And the third is it produces the voice. The larynx consists of three cartilage structures, three singles and three paired. These cartilages are connected to one another by muscles and ligaments. The first single and largest cartilage is the thyroid cartilage or the Adam's apple. The second single and most inferior cartilage of the larynx is the cricoid cartilage. The thyroid and cricoid cartilages maintain an open passageway for air movement. The third single cartilage is the epiglottis. It differs from the other cartilages in that it consists of elastic cartilage rather than hyaline cartilage. An important function of the epiglottis is that it protects the airway during swallowing. It prevents swallowed materials from entering the larynx by covering the glottis or the opening of the larynx. As the larynx elevates during swallowing, the epiglottis tips posteriorly to cover the glottis. These pictures show the three single cartilages. The thyroid cartilage has a shield shape and is attached superiorly to the hyoid bone. The cricoid cartilage forms the base of the larynx on which the other cartilages rest. The inferior margin of the epiglottis is attached to the thyroid cartilage anteriorly, and the superior part of the epiglottis projects superiorly as a free flap towards the tongue. Let's now move on to the three paired cartilages. The three pairs of cartilages are on each side of the posterior part of the larynx. The top cartilage is the cuneiform cartilage, the middle cartilage is the corniculate cartilage, and the bottom cartilage is the arytenoid cartilage. The paired cartilages form an attachment site for the vocal folds. The right picture shows the location of the cuneiform cartilage on the sagittal view of the larynx. The left picture shows both the corniculate cartilage and the arytenoid cartilage. The blue color representing the arytenoid cartilage, and superior to it is the corniculate cartilage representing the purple color. The larynx also houses the vocal cords. There are two sets of ligaments that extend from the posterior surface of the thyroid cartilage to the paired cartilages. The superior set of ligaments forms the vestibular folds or false vocal cords, which prevent air from leaving the lungs, as when a person holds his or her breath, and also prevents food and liquids from entering the larynx. On the other hand, the inferior set of ligaments composes the vocal folds or true vocal cords, which is the primary source of voice production. This structure shows the vocal folds and the vestibular folds. It also includes rima glottidis, which is the narrowest part of the cavity of the larynx. As to how sound is produced, air moving past the vocal folds causes them to vibrate, producing sound. Muscles control the length and tension of the vocal folds. The force of air moving past the vocal folds control the loudness, and the tension of the vocal folds control the pitch of the voice. Laryngitis is an inflammation of the mucous epithelium of the vocal folds. Swelling of the vocal folds during laryngitis inhibits voice production.
So, moving on to the lower respiratory tract, the trachea, bronchi and bronchioles, and as well as the alveoli, which makes up the lungs, make up the lower respiratory tract. So, they are responsible in taking air from the upper respiratory system, absorbing oxygen, and expelling carbon dioxide.
Trachea are also known as the windpipe. They are greatly responsible in facilitating air to the larynx. The trachea is a membranous tube attached to the larynx, consisting of connective tissue and smooth muscle that makes up the structure of the trachea. Trachea's main function is to carry air in and out of your lungs. Considering the structure, it is a stiff, flexible tube, and it provides a reliable pathway for the oxygen to enter our bodies. The trachea is reinforced with 16 to 20 C-shaped pieces of hyaline cartilage. Observation: there are C-shaped cartilages from the anterior and lateral sides of the trachea. As you can see on the right side, along with the esophagus, trachealis muscle, and respiratory mucosa, the trachea is surrounded by hyaline cartilages. As the cartilages protect the trachea while maintaining an open passageway for air. The main components of the posterior wall of the trachea are ligamentous membrane and smooth muscles.
The wall of the trachea is made out of 4 distinct tissue layers. Along with the luminal surface, the trachea is lined with respiratory mucosa or mucous membrane. Deep to the mucosa is the submucosa. Just like the lamina surface, the submucosa is primarily composed of loose areolar connective tissues. Furthermore, many blood vessels, neurons, and glands are also present. Mucous glands that secrete a combination of water and mucus along to the luminal surface of the trachea through narrow ducts. External to the submucosa is the cartilaginous layer containing C-shaped hyaline cartilage. Lastly is the outer layer of the trachea. The adventitia it is a band of loose connective tissue that loosely binds the trachea to the esophagus and other nearby organs. Next is bronchi. Bronchi plays a role for air passageway. The bronchi carry air into our lungs. At the end of the bronchi, the bronchioles carry air to the small sacs into our lungs called alveoli. Alveoli performs our body's gas exchange. Our trachea is divided into 2 main bronchi, which is the left main bronchus and right main bronchus, and are also called as the primary bronchi, which is linked into our lungs. Our heart has displaced the left main bronchus, which appears to be more horizontal than the right main bronchus, while the right main bronchus is larger, shorter, and more vertical as compared to the left main bronchus, and is more in an indirect line with the trachea. Foreign things that enter the trachea frequently lodge from the trachea to the main bronchi. The major bronchi, like the trachea, are lined with pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium and supported by C-shaped cartilage pieces. The last organ for the lower respiratory system is the lung. Lung is responsible in facilitating breathing. The lungs are the principal organs in respiration. The superior lobe, middle lobe, and inferior lobes are the 3 lobes that are located in our right lung. The superior lobe and inferior lobe are the 2 lobes of the left lung. What separates the lobes of the lungs are the deep conspicuous fissures on the surface of the lungs connective tissue septa divides each lobes into bronchopulmonary segments, which are separated from one another by connective tissue septa but are not visible as surface fissures. Alveoli are hollow and small sacs that play the role in air-filled chambers or pathways where oxygen and blood come close into contact with each other. But did you know that there are 300 billion alveoli in our lungs? Anyway, gas exchange between air and blood takes place on the respiratory membrane of our lungs. The walls of alveoli and the surrounding capillaries make up the majority of the structure. Our lungs are part of the respiratory system, a group of organs and tissues that work together to help us breathe. The respiratory system's main job is to move fresh air into our body while removing waste gases.
After going through the lower respiratory tract, I will now tackle the general overview of the process of breathing. So, how do our lungs work? Our lungs work in this process called pulmonary ventilation. This is when oxygen is breathed in through our nose and mouth, and at the same time, carbon dioxide, a waste gas, moves from our blood to the lungs and is exhaled to our body. This process is called gas exchange. Now, to fully understand the topic, let's walk through the process of breathing through this animation clip. Air has components that include oxygen. Our body will send signals to the brain, which allows the muscles around the lungs and the diaphragm to contract as we allow air to be breathed in and enter our body. Air is breathed in through our mouth and nose and passes through these shelf-like things called conchi, going through the pharynx to the trachea until it reaches the bronchi around the lungs. One trivia here is that there is this flap cartilage in front of the larynx that functions depending on what you do. During breathing, the cartilage is pointed upward to allow airflow into the trachea or the windpipe. During swallowing, the cartilage falls down to prevent food from going into the trachea. And if that happens, which you don't want to, a gag reflex will initiate as food will go through your lungs, which is a bad thing. Going back to the airflow, after the air passes through the trachea, it will go to the bronchi and split the gas with one in each lung. The air will then enter into tiny passages of air called bronchioles. Lungs are just like balloons, but instead of being hollow, it is actually spongy inside. In these bronchioles, the air will enter the tiny air sacs called alveoli, which are surrounded by a network of capillaries full of red blood cells. The air that enters the alveoli fills in the sac, causing the lungs to inflate. This is also where the air in the alveoli will undergo gas exchange. In the capillaries, carbon dioxide is present as well as oxygen in the alveoli. Both of these molecules will go through the process of diffusion where oxygen crosses over to the capillaries to the hemoglobin, and capillaries give up their waste carbon dioxide. The oxygen-rich hemoglobin, picked up by the blood, is then transported back to the heart. So, what will happen to the unloaded carbon dioxide? Of course, this gas will be exhaled by our body. After that, our diaphragm will relax as we exhale, and it will also cause our lungs to compress. That is how the process of breathing occurs, and the cycle repeats again as we breathe. Another trivia, our lungs inhale and exhale between 15 and 25 times a minute, which amounts to 10,000 liters of air a day. So that is all for today. We hope that you learned something about the overview of the respiratory system. We are Group 1 and we are now signing off. Bye!